Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host as always, Marcus Sadu, and today we've got a myth-busting episode for you. I'm going to bang out 40 fitness fallacies that just won't seem to die. So let's get rolling. First one is, if you stop working out, your muscles will turn to fat. So this is just not physically possible. Muscles need a stimulus to stay around. So a stimulus most likely will be weight training or any sort of overload. So if you stop weight training, you're going to lose muscle, but your muscle can't physically turn into fat. People just typically gain body fat when they stop training and when they stop expending calories via exercise. So if you don't use it, you lose it, applies here, but your muscle is not turning to fat. You're just losing it because there is not that external stimulus in place. Number two, eating more fat burns more fat. Your body is going to use the fuel that you provide. So if you eat and ingest more fat, your body is going to preferentially burn fat for fuel. You know, that's that classic ketogenic diet. If you're on a higher fat diet, you're going to use more fat for fuel. And it's misleading to say that your body burns more fat because it's not necessarily burning body fat, but it's using the ingested fat for fuel. So a little bit of a play on words there. And I think that people sort of get duped into thinking that that means that you're going to burn more body fat that you're carrying around, but it's really just your ingested intake of dietary fat. Number three, in order to burn the most fat, you need to be in your fat burning zone while doing cardio. So this kind of dovetails off number two, but at lower levels of intensity, so you can think about this as a classic walk, you're just out on a nature walk or something, you're going to use more fat for fuel versus a higher exercise intensity, so something like sprinting, where you're going to use more carbohydrate or glucose for energy. This doesn't really make a difference in the big scheme of things. It just comes back to calories in versus calories out. So if you're burning more calories via a lower intensity cardio like walking, or then you're going to burn more overall fat doing that versus sprinting if you just burn less calories. But it's a little bit of a play on words because it's just what sort of fuel you're burning during that type of exercise versus you're burning more fat in that quote unquote fat burning zone. So it really, again, a misleading statement. Ab exercises and core work tone and result in fat loss in those areas. So basically, crunches give you abs. And if you do ab work, you're going to strengthen your core and abs. But in order to actually see your abdominals, you need to get rid of the belly fat that is covering your abs via a caloric deficit. You can't just do a bunch of crunches and then preferentially burn fat in your torso. That's just not the way it works. If women lift weights, they'll get bulky. So men have about 10 times the amount of testosterone on average that women do. And there are millions of guys in the gym every year trying to get bulky without success. So ladies, you don't have to worry about getting bulky if you lift weights. I would highly recommend lifting weights so you can get stronger. But where this sort of comes from, I think, is that when you lift weights, say you do a bench press, for example, the working muscles fill up with blood and you get something that's termed a pump. So those muscles fill up with blood and temporarily they appear almost inflated or bigger, but that pump will go down after your workout. There's a chance that the swelling may stick around for a day or two or something like that. Nothing crazy, but I think this is why this myth came into place, is that women have gone to the gym, worked out with weights, felt that temporary pump, looked in the mirror, thought that they were instantly getting bigger and bulkier. But it's just a temporary mechanism where blood goes to the working muscle and then it just goes away. So nothing to worry about there. And I think that's where this sort of lifting weights makes you bulky thing came from. Do low reps and heavy weight to bulk and high reps and lightweight to tone. So the most important thing when you want to build muscle is progressive overload. So you need to lift more weight than you have before in order to adapt and therefore get stronger and grow. When it comes to high reps toning with light weight, basically in order to tone, which is just sort of a buzzword, you need to be in a caloric deficit, and that's just losing fat. So it's not really the truth in that low reps and heavy weight, you should do that when you're bulking versus high reps lightweight when you're toning. It's just you need to be in a caloric deficit or surplus in the case of the bulk in order to reach your goals, and be sure that if you're trying to put on weight and muscle that you want progressive overload, so you're lifting more weight, say week to week. And then if you want to lose fat, you can still follow the progressive overload principle, of course, but you need to be in a caloric deficit. So that's the most important thing there. Fat loss is a slow process. So it's actually a fairly quick process if you compare it to muscle gain. Muscle gain is a much, much slower process. So an example here would be folks can lose, if you're very heavy and you have a lot of weight to lose, people have lost 100 pounds in a year. But no one is putting on 100 pounds of muscle in a year. Most people, you're not even putting on 100 pounds of muscle in a lifetime. Even with, ridiculous amounts of drugs, lots of people are not making those kind of gains. So it may seem like fat loss is a slow process, but comparatively speaking, when you're looking at muscle gain versus fat loss is a way quicker process. Number 8, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. That's just not true. You can eat breakfast if you're hungry in the morning and you like to, or you can skip it. If not, it doesn't rev up your metabolism. It doesn't get things going like that. Just do what fits you. Have a meal cadence pattern that fits with your goals and you find it easiest to adhere to. That's the most important thing. You have to be sore or else your workout is pointless. So soreness can be an indicator of a good workout. It can be, but just because you're not sore, it doesn't mean that your workout was pointless. That's just not the case. So you don't have to be sore, but it can be an indicator that, you work the muscles that you were trying to work and all that sort of stuff, but you don't have to be hobbling up the stairs or like super, super sore in order to get a good workout. That's just not the case. Longer workouts are better workouts. So quality tends to diminish as time goes on in a workout. So this is why athletes have multiple workouts per day versus a 1, 4, or 5 hour session. There's a point of diminishing return. So you're just going to get tired and fatigued, right? So it doesn't mean that a longer workout is a better workout, because performance tends to trend downwards the longer and longer your session is. So again, it doesn't mean that you have to be in the gym for hours. You might want to go to the gym or just work out more frequently for less time, and then you can sort of make the most of your session quality-wise versus having, 1 or 2 marathon workouts per week. So you can keep the quality a little bit higher if you break up your workouts into pieces versus having them be super, super long. Eating before bed or after a certain hour is bad. So calories in, calories out is king. In my opinion, most folks, just societally speaking, have a little bit of maybe a tendency to snack at night or eat something while they're watching Netflix or something like that. So the most important thing is adherence overall to your diet or whatever sort of nutritional approach that you're following. So adherence is king. If you find it easier to adhere by having a smaller breakfast and a medium-sized lunch and a really big dinner because you tend to get snacky at night or something like that, that is going to be a better option for you than having a big breakfast when you're not that hungry, a big lunch, again, when you're like, you could eat, but you don't need anything major, and then a small dinner, and then you feel super snacky at night, and then you just end up consuming more calories overall. So eating before bed is fine. Eating after a certain hour is totally fine. The primary factor here is overall adherence and calorie intake. That's the most important thing. High protein diets are harmful for the kidneys. So this came from a study that was done on folks with impaired kidney function. They found that eating higher amounts of protein increased something called their GFR, their glomerular filtration rate. And if you have healthy kidneys, which most people do, you don't have to worry one bit about consuming protein. You're fine there. And protein is very satiating, so it can be definitely a great tool in your toolbox when it comes to fat loss, because it keeps you nice and full. Number 13, you lose tons of muscle when you diet. So again, we talked about this a little bit before, but you need a stimulus in order to keep your muscle around or grow more muscle. So progressive overload. And if you diet and then your training goes to shit and you're not following those same principles, so maybe you slack on your weight training or something like that, you're going to lose muscle. But if you continue on with your weight training in adequate amounts, like loads, you are going to, chances are, maintain the vast, vast majority of your muscle. And really, it only becomes an issue when you start getting really lean. I'm talking like, you're stepping on stage as a bodybuilder or a competitor kind of lean. You just really don't have to worry about losing muscle. The thing is that when people lose a bunch of body fat, they think that they're losing muscle, but really they just didn't have nearly as much muscle that they thought to begin with. So for women, it usually kind of manifests itself in their butt. They're like, oh man, I'm getting a flat ass, like ever since I started dieting. For men, typically it's in the chest and arms. They're like, man, I have no chest and my arms are tiny now. You just didn't have much muscle to begin with. So when you lose fat, body fat accumulates everywhere. So you're going to lose it in those areas as well. And therefore, you might have just thought that you had more muscle in those areas than you really did. Number 14, I can't lose weight because I have a slow metabolism. So there are cases of legit hypothyroid, but this is the exception, not the rule. So chances are, and I'd say 99% of cases, it's more of an adherence issue. So you're just consuming more calories than you think you are. And a way around this is just to record what you eat for 7 days straight, like everything. Liquid calories, what you eat, alcohol, include that sort of stuff too. And just track what you're ingesting. And if your weight is maintaining, then you're in a caloric maintenance situation. If your weight's going up, you're eating too much. And if your weight is going down, then you're in a deficit. So the best way around this is to just be really honest with yourself, record everything that you're taking in, and then you can see if there's a legit thyroid issue or something else that's going on versus you're just eating more than you think, because it's really easy to sort of, grab a few things here, a handful of nuts there, and calories just add up really, really quick. So, try that if you're thinking that there might be thyroid or slow metabolism situation going on. Chances are that's not the case. Number 15, muscle weighs more than fat. So 1 pound of feathers is going to weigh the same as a pound of bricks. A pound is a pound. So a pound of feathers may fill up a garbage bag, and a pound of bricks may just be one single brick. The volume is different, but of course, the weight is the same, right? A pound is a pound. I need to eat for my blood type. So all I'm going to say here is there's just no science to back this up at all. Yeah, just untrue. 17, I burned X number of calories working out today. We just burn a lot less calories than we think we do during exercise. Tracking on, say, a elliptical, how many calories you've burned, is extremely inaccurate. I wouldn't use it as a measure unless you're going to say, I'm going to do 300 calories of cardio, for example, or a 300 calorie burn 3 days a week. that is going to be consistent in the fact that it might not be what you're actually burning, but you're going to burn the same amount roughly because you're hitting that 300 calorie mark on that machine. So then the next week, if you're like, oh, okay, I'm hitting a bit of a plateau, then I'm going to go to 400 calories each session, something like that. So it's not that the machine is accurate, but it's consistently inconsistent, if that makes sense. So you can use that as a general guideline if you'd like to, but man, Fitbits, all these new sort of gadgets that track calories burned, they're just incredibly inaccurate at this point. 18, you need to change exercises every workout to improve. You need progressive overload. So we touched on this again before. You need, if you want to improve, and we'll say that improvement means getting stronger or building some muscle, that means you have to do a little bit more than you did before in order for the body to adapt. So you could do the bench press, for example, for your chest for, if you're a beginner, man, probably 2 to 3 months every workout if you wanted to. As long as you're following the progressive overload principle, so adding more weight to the bar or doing more reps, essentially doing more work, you're going to improve. You don't need to change your exercises every workout, not even every second workout, not even every month necessarily as a beginner. You just need to be following the progressive overload principle. You need to drink water all day long. So I have changed my mind on this a little bit over the past few years. I used to really push the water intake, and the way that I tell my clients to approach it now is you probably want to pee clear 2 to 3 times a day and you're super well hydrated. I think you're covering your bases. Now, hydration becomes a lot more important when you're looking at elite athletes for performance, because they may have multiple sessions in a day. So they have to really, really dial in hydration. They're also just, this is their livelihood, right? It's essentially their job. So they need to dial that stuff in a lot tighter. But if for everyday people that are just, going to the gym here and there, staying active and want to be fit, you don't need to worry too much about water intake. But again, I follow that sort of pee 2 to 3 times clear daily. And also something to note here is it depends what kind of foods you're eating, because single to minimal ingredient whole foods contain a lot more water than heavily processed foods do. For example, a piece of fruit and veggies, even a piece of protein, contains a fair bit of water versus, this is an extreme example, but something like a Pop-Tart, not a whole lot of water in there, right? So water counts from your food as well. So if you're eating the vast majority of your intake from single to minimal ingredient whole foods, you don't have to worry about water as much, because there is a bunch of water that's coming along with your actual food intake. Number 20, intermittent fasting is the answer. So there are a bunch of different ways to implement an intermittent fasting approach. If you want a more detailed look at that, you can refer to podcast number 7 with Jeff Rothschild. We delve all into intermittent fasting. The whole episode's about it. Now, let's assume, for the sake of this talk right now, that we are going to use a skipping breakfast approach. So what typically happens is that folks tend not to make up the calories in later meals. So they eat a little bit more at lunch, they eat a little bit more at dinner, but not enough more to make up the entire caloric load that they would have had from breakfast. So basically, this just becomes a calories in, calories out issue. You're eating less overall, and that can result in fat loss. Now, there can potentially be some added benefits to stuff like, autophagy and things like that via fasting periods. However, we're just talking about a strictly a fat loss standpoint here. There's nothing magical about intermittent fasting. It's a calories in, calories out issue and an adherence issue. So again, but if you want to learn more about all the ins and outs of that stuff, episode 7 of the podcast. Ketogenic diets are the fat loss holy grail. So there's nothing special about ketogenic diets. However, again, if you adhere to it and you maintain a caloric deficit, coming back again, calories in, calories out. That is the primary mechanism of weight loss when it comes to any diet, essentially, but the ketogenic diet as well. So if you want to learn more about the ketogenic diet, all the ins and outs of that, episode 11 with Danny Lennon of the podcast. I interviewed him for that. Number 22, you must go on a low-carb diet to lose fat. So again, some folks find limiting carbs is a great way to maintain a caloric deficit. They just find it's easy to adhere to. They don't feel super hungry all day. They don't get these crazy blood sugar swings, stuff like that. The result of fat loss via a low-carb diet is, again, calories in, calories out. I sound like a bit of a broken record here, but there's more than one way to skin a cat. So whatever you can adhere to, whatever approach you can adhere to, is the one that is going to be efficacious for you. So everyone's different here. The best program, plan, diet, whatever is the one that you follow. So something to keep in mind. Also, when people go on a low-carb diet, typically it's quite motivating right away because carbohydrate pulls water with it into the body. So when they eliminate carbohydrate, they not only lose muscle and liver glycogen, but they also lose a bunch of water with that. So they have a fairly rapid weight loss effect right off the bat. So they could lose, maybe depending on the size of the person, but if I was to just go very low carb all of a sudden, in the next 3 days, I'd probably lose 4 to 5 pounds. Now, I'm not losing 4 to 5 pounds of fat tissue. It's just that, again, carbohydrate pulls water with it. So it can be quite motivating for folks that are like, man, this diet's working right off the bat. So that can be sort of a motivating factor of a low-carb diet. But again, calories in, calories out, guys. Bulletproof coffee is magic. So saturated fat was really demonized for quite a while. Then we discovered that it's not the devil, but then folks went to the other extreme and were like, man, if saturated fat is not evil, then it must be great, and therefore I'm going to start adding butter and coconut oil to my fucking coffee. Just because something is okay or some of something is good, it doesn't mean that more of it is better. So people have made a lot of money off this bulletproof coffee concept. Some people's lipids go a little funky when they start consuming a ton of saturated fat, so something to keep in mind. But again, just because some of something is okay or good doesn't mean that more of it is better. And also, if your goal is fat loss, you might not be wanting to drink liquid calories. It depends on you. Some people find success with this approach, but see what works for you. 24, I touched on this just now. If a little bit is good, more must be better. Another example of this is training. So some exercise is good, a moderate amount, or even, a decently good amount of exercise is good, but too much is not, right? It gets to a point of diminishing returns where you just can't recover, your body's sort of breaking down, you're going in the opposite direction that you want to go. So some training is good, it doesn't mean that more is better. So if 3 to 4 hours a week is good, it doesn't mean that 30 to 40 hours is better, right? There's a point of diminishing returns, and there's a point of doing too much. So you need to eat 6 meals a day to lose fat and build muscle. So you really don't need to eat more than, you could eat 1 meal a day if you wanted to. It's all about adherence and what works for you. But if you want to build muscle, you can build muscle on 3 meals a day, and 6 meals is just really not that different. It's also just easier from a prep standpoint. From a fat loss angle, adherence is key. So if you find it easier to adhere with 6 meals a day, hey, have at it. Whatever fits your lifestyle best. I personally just like fewer, bigger meals because, again, it's less prep for me and it just simply takes less time. I prefer to just eat bigger meals less often than smaller meals more often, but this depends on the individual. So do what works for you. Number 25, you shouldn't deadlift if you have a bad back. This is going to depend on the person, and what I see anecdotally is that some of the people that have quote unquote bad backs, so they think they have bad backs and they shouldn't be deadlifting because something's going on with their back. A lot of the time they need deadlifting the most, because deadlifting is essentially the ultimate back exercise, and if you learn how to do them properly, you can strengthen your back. So a lot of the time it's not something that you should be avoiding, but actually doing, because your posterior chain and your back is just weak, and maybe that's where a lot of the issue of your quote unquote bad back is stemming from. So something to just kind of look at and reassess there. 26, fat burning supplements work. Most fat burners have caffeine in them, which is an effective ergogenic aid, which just means it improves performance. You might burn a little bit more calories if you are feeling more energetic throughout the day or in the gym or something, or you have a more effective workout, which can lead to better results ultimately. But fat burners themselves, you're probably going to burn more calories walking to the store to buy the fat burner than you will as actually a result of taking it. Calories in, calories out is king when it comes to fat loss. Bro splits are optimal. So a bro split would be considered something like chest on Monday, back on Tuesday, arms on Wednesday, legs on Friday, shoulders Saturday kind of thing. So you're breaking each muscle group up into a separate workout. You can definitely progress with this approach. However, especially for natural lifters, people who aren't taking gear, essentially steroids, more frequency is probably going to be better. So instead of doing, say, 12 sets of chest on Monday, you could do 6 sets of chest on Monday and then 6 on Thursday, and the quality of each session is going to be better because you're just going to have less fatigue throughout the session. So I would recommend splitting up frequency, assuming that the volume, so total sets, is equated for. You could do less work on each day, but just break it up a little bit. I think that you're probably going to get better results out of that because you can put more quality into each session. You just get fatigued doing too much work in a given period of time. So you could do maybe upper body on Monday, lower body Tuesday, upper body Thursday, lower body Friday kind of thing, and just get more quality work out of your sessions. 28, you have to do cardio to lose fat. So hanging out in a step mill or an elliptical will burn calories, and therefore it can lend to a greater caloric deficit. But you can always lower calories via diet as well, so you don't have to do a bunch of cardio. I would recommend, obviously, you want to move, right? You don't just want to be like, I'll eat less and sit on the couch all the time. But it's calories in, calories out gig. If you don't have to do traditional cardio, I always encourage my clients to, say, hit that 8,000 to 10,000 step mark per day, preferably outdoors, because I think there are added benefits of just being outside. But you don't have to kill yourself on cardio equipment in order to get lean. Diet is king when it comes to fat loss. So 29, you can't train a sore muscle. So it does depend on how sore the muscle is. If you've really overdone it, and you're having trouble walking upstairs or something like that, that's a different story. But if you've got some general soreness, a light session may increase your recovery, speed up recovery, or say if your legs are a little sore, getting the blood flowing and going for a walk can actually increase and speed recovery. So I would kind of encourage it. A sore muscle, you can train it, but again, if you're incredibly sore and you can barely move, that's a different story. I would probably lay off, and then I'd also look at your workout programming, because you don't want to be that sore from one session. The scale dictates your fitness level. So the lighter you are doesn't necessarily mean the fitter you are. So this is probably a societal thing more than anything, I'd say. You don't walk around with your scale weight on your forehead, guys. So folks just see your body, not what you weigh. Find a weight that you feel, look, and perform your best. I'd say that is an ideal weight for you, wherever that lines up. So focus on what you're feeling, looking, and performing like, more than saying, I need to get to 130 pounds in order to, be happy or something like that. Like, just don't get me wrong, the scale, if your goal is fat loss, the scale needs to be trending down. However, it's not the be all end all. And it doesn't dictate your overall fitness level. 31, peanut butter and cheese are good sources of protein. So, no, you need to consume a shitload of calories in order to hit an adequate amount of protein from nut butter or cheese. So 1 ounce of cheddar cheese has 115 calories in it, and you get about 7 grams of protein with that, okay? An ounce of peanut butter has 180 calories in it, and you get 6 grams of protein with that. 1 ounce of turkey breast has 50 calories, and you get 9 grams of protein out of that. So let's say we're shooting for a general number of 30 grams of protein at a meal. You need to consume 495 calories of cheese in order to hit that 30 grams of protein mark. You need to consume 900 calories of peanut butter in order to hit that 30 grams of protein digit. And you only need to consume 170 calories of turkey breast in order to reach that 30 grams of protein. So, man, quality protein is going to come from typically other sources than peanut butter and cheese, because you just need to consume way too many calories in order to hit an adequate amount of protein, which is just going to drive up your overall caloric load for the day. So that is a great way to put on body fat. 32, exercising first thing in the morning on an empty stomach burns more fat. It just doesn't. You need to look at overall caloric burn throughout the whole day. That's the important thing. Really, when it comes to exercise, get it in when you can get it in. If you find it easiest to get your workout in before work, and you find yourself tired at the end of the day and you're just not going to do it in the morning. If you find it easy to get your workout in at lunch, do that. And if you find that working out at night works best for you, then do that. It's all about getting the work in, as opposed to when you do it being optimal. It's just not the case. You need to drink a protein shake within 3 seconds of finishing your workout. So it's called the post-workout window. The body just isn't that inefficient. Eating normal meals throughout the day, they take time to digest. You're going to have protein trickling into your system. It's more than going to cover your basics. If you're an athlete, on the other hand, doing multiple workouts, this is a different story. You're going to need to refuel, most likely with carbohydrate in between workouts, because you're going to have to work out again in, say, 2 to 3 hours from then. So if you're an elite athlete, you need to focus on intra-workout and post-workout nutrition a lot more than the everyday person. But for the everyday person, man, your normal meals are going to more than cover your bases on that. The idea of fat-burning foods. So, you see things like, these 5 foods will melt body fat. This just doesn't even make any sense. The idea that certain foods burn fat and others don't is just not true. Calories in, calories out is king, and there are no special foods when it comes to burning body fat. Overall caloric intake matters most. Sugar is to blame for all your problems. So a lot of my clients will submit their questions each week and they'll say, I'm really having a hard time with sugar. I'm really craving sugar. I've got such a sweet tooth. And I ask them, okay, what food specifically are you craving? And they'll say things like cookies, ice cream, donuts. Those foods do have large amounts of sugar in them, but they also have large amounts of fat. And so it's not that you're necessarily craving sugar itself, but just caloric density in general, because these foods are highly rewarding to the brain. So if you were craving sugar on its own, you'd probably be walking around with a bag of table sugar, like spooning it into your mouth. Nobody's doing that. It's just not appealing. It doesn't taste good. But in the context of a hyper palatable, yummy food like cookies or ice cream, those combinations of sugar and fat and salt and all those delicious food properties are going to that are high in calories are going to be highly rewarding. So it's not that you're necessarily just craving sugar. Sugar isn't to blame for all this stuff. It's hyper palatable foods that are put together in amazing combinations that just make them over the top yummy. So if you want to learn more about this, episode 5 of the podcast with Stefan Guillenet, he's a neuroscientist. He wrote the book, The Hungry Brain. We delve into all of the food properties, specifically and why we overeat. It's an amazing episode. I'd highly recommend listening to that if you're interested in learning more about that stuff. 36, fat gain happens overnight. Say you go out, you eat a big pasta or pizza meal, and you step on the scale the next day and you're up 2 pounds. It's not like you put on 2 pounds of body fat overnight. There are a lot more factors at play here. So water retention, salt intake, food volume, the actual food weight that you consumed. So bloating, food intolerance is potentially, there's a lot more going on. You're not just going to necessarily have one meal and then, pile on 2 pounds of body fat overnight. If you're interested in learning all the factors that impact the scale, episode 8 of the podcast, I outline what impacts your scale weight day to day. I'd highly recommend that one. 37, common and normal are one and the same. Just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal. A lot of people feel bloated pretty much 24/7, and they think that that's normal because they just feel that way all the time. That is super common. I see that all the time. I think, just about every single client that's come to me in the beginning has been bloated from certain types of food intolerances or just overeating, and there's a bunch of factors at play there. But bloating is not normal, it's common. So there's a very distinct difference between what's normal and common. So just something to think about there. Skipping a meal is harmful. Your metabolism's not going to crash. You don't need to sweat it. Just listen to your body. For example, if you had a huge meal last night and you're just not hungry for breakfast this morning because you just consumed a shit ton of calories, don't force it. Especially when fat loss is your goal. Skipping that meal may actually contribute to your results, right? Because of the calories in, calories out situation here. So it's quite odd to be constantly fed. Like if you haven't missed a meal in the last 10 years, that's odd, right? That's super weird from an evolutionary standpoint. It's just we evolved in a food scarce environment some of the time at least. So skipping a meal here and there, no problem. It's all good. Just listen to your body. As you get older, it's harder to lose weight. It's really important to look at lifestyle factors here and how your lifestyle changes as you age. People are much, much more likely to be less active the older and older they get. So that just contributes to less calories burned throughout the day. And if eating patterns don't change at all, that is a recipe for fat gain right there. So yeah, maybe the metabolism does adapt and slow down slightly as we age. But that could be a result of lower energy expenditure as well, right? Because energy expenditure raises the metabolism. So something to think about, take a real good look if you are guilty of this as you get older, it's harder to lose weight myth, because you need to look at how your lifestyle has changed over time and how that's impacting your overall body composition. So this one kind of dovetails off the last one. Menopause causes fat gain. Same deal, right? Reduced activity and lifestyle factors, moving less as we age, is going to contribute to a higher body weight. So people defy this logic all the time when they get super lean or they're in the best shape of their lives at a later age in life. So if you want to learn more about this stuff, episode 13 and 14 with Lyle McDonald, we covered a lot of this stuff in detail. It's all about female fat loss. Next one, all stress is bad. The thing I like to think about here, the quote I like to think about is stress is like the strings on a violin. Too much and the strings will break, too little and you can't make music. So there is sort of a sweet spot here, not a sweet spot, I won't say sweet spot, a sweet range. Stress is a moving target and so many different factors contribute to stressors in our lives. So, being overweight is a stress on the body. Not sleeping enough is a stress on the body. Having mental and emotional trauma is a stress. So all of these things contribute to stressors. And if there's just too much stress going on in general, then you're too stressed out. But on the contrary, you don't want zero stress in your life, right? If we had zero stress, we'd never get off the couch. So there is a sort of a sweet range that you kind of want some stress in your life, just not too much, right? Too much is not a great thing, but also too little. And man, I would just be a lazy dude sitting on the couch with zero stress. So you need to starve or feed a cold. Listen to your body when you're sick. If you're hungry, eat. If you're not, don't. It's really as simple as that. I wouldn't recommend drinking a bunch of liquid calories while you're feeling under the weather. Also, you want to make sure that the foods that you are eating, you tolerate well, because again, touching on that stress factor, eating foods that you don't tolerate or digest well is a stressor in itself. And your body is already trying to kick a cold, so you don't want to add to that stress load, right? So something to keep in mind, if you are going to eat, make sure that it's quality food that you digest well. But if you're not hungry, don't force it. The last one, the next new thing is the thing that's going to work, right? When you're in the grocery store in the checkout line, there are 20 magazines talking about the new diet that's going to make you drop 10 pounds in 10 days. And then next month, it's weird because it's a different diet. And that one is the new one that's, going to solve all your problems. And then the following month, it's some sort of magical new supplement that's been discovered from, I don't know, extracting from some sort of rare jungle plant. I don't know. It's crazy, right? Then the following month, it's some sort of secret workout routine that we've, never come across before. Man, the basics work. Anybody who has had weight loss success has followed the general principles of, a caloric deficit, moving, sleeping properly, all that sort of stuff, right? So the next new thing is likely a scam, essentially. Like there's nothing crazy new that's coming out these days. But for some reason, we as a consumer seem to, fall for this all the time. It's unfortunate, but because it's appealing, right? It's appealing to think that there's an easier way to do things because weight loss is really difficult. So do your best not to fall into that trap. Follow basic principles. The basic principles have been around for a long time because they work. That's it, guys. Myth-busting episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much to everyone that reviewed the podcast on iTunes. It really helps us grow, really helps us reach more folks with this helpful information, and that's what this platform's all about. So thanks again for that, and I will catch you guys on the next episode. See ya.